Pico had an assignment due tomorrow. It wasn't even that difficult. If he focused, he could finish it in about 2 hours. So he opened his notebook, picked up his pencil, took a deep breath, and then he noticed his desk was a little messy. I'll clean it first. 5 minutes later, his desk looked perfect. Now he was finally ready, until he remembered his water bottle was empty. He couldn't possibly study while feeling thirsty. So he walked to the kitchen, filled his bottle, came back, sat down again. Then he noticed his pencil wasn't very sharp. A dull pencil definitely wouldn't help him think. So he sharpened it twice, just to make sure. Finally, everything was ready. He looked at the first question. Read it once. Read it again. Then suddenly, he wondered, how long can emperor penguins actually hold their breath? That seemed like an important question. One search became another. That article led to another article. Then another. 30 minutes disappeared. Pico looked at the clock. He hadn't answered a single question. He sighed. What is wrong with me? Why do I keep doing this? Maybe he just wasn't disciplined enough. Maybe he was lazy. Maybe everyone else knew some secret that he didn't. So the next day, he promised himself something. No more procrastinating. Tomorrow would be different. But tomorrow looked exactly like today. He cleaned, organized, checked his phone, watched a video about productivity, read comments, opened another video, closed it, opened another one. By evening, the assignment still wasn't finished. Pico wasn't avoiding work because he wanted to fail. He genuinely wanted to get started. So, why couldn't he? Pico wasn't alone. Everywhere he looked, other penguins were struggling too. One kept saying, I'll start after lunch. Another said, I work better under pressure. Someone else promised, I'll definitely do it tomorrow. Tomorrow. It was always tomorrow. Pico started wondering, why does tomorrow always seem like the perfect day to start? Tomorrow feels different. Tomorrow feels organized. Tomorrow feels motivated. Tomorrow feels like someone else's problem. But when tomorrow finally arrives, it quietly becomes today. And suddenly, today feels just as difficult as yesterday. Pico thought something strange was happening. Why did his future self always seem smarter than his present self? Then he discovered something psychologists call present bias. Imagine Pico gives you 2 fish. 1 fish, right now. Or 2 fish tomorrow. Most hungry penguins would grab the fish they can eat immediately, even though waiting gives a better reward. Our brains naturally value rewards we can have now, more than bigger rewards that come later. Thousands of years ago, that made perfect sense. Food wasn't guaranteed. If you found something valuable, you took it, because tomorrow wasn't promised. That instinct kept our ancestors alive. But today, that same instinct creates a problem. Studying gives rewards later. Exercise gives rewards later. Learning a new skill gives rewards later. Saving money gives rewards later. But watching one funny video feels rewarding immediately. Checking one notification feels rewarding immediately. Eating another snack feels rewarding immediately. Pico finally realized his brain wasn't choosing between studying and doing nothing. It was choosing between a reward that exists right now and a reward that's still somewhere in the future. Suddenly, the choice didn't seem so mysterious anymore. His brain wasn't lazy. It was simply following ancient rules inside a completely modern world. But something still didn't make sense. Sometimes, Pico didn't even enjoy scrolling. Sometimes he wasn't having fun at all. He kept switching between apps, watching random videos, checking the same messages, looking at the clock, then opening another app. If none of it was making him happy, why couldn't he stop? That answer was even more surprising. Pico thought he finally understood. His brain liked rewards that came immediately. That explained why he kept reaching for his phone. But another question appeared. If the assignment was so important, why couldn't he simply start? One afternoon, Pico decided to run an experiment. He opened his notebook, looked at the first question, and told himself, just write 1 sentence. That didn't sound difficult. But somehow, his flipper froze. The page looked enormous. The assignment suddenly felt much bigger than it actually was. It wasn't just homework anymore. It felt like climbing a mountain. So instead, he looked out the window. He adjusted his chair. He organized his pencils. Again. Then he made another excuse. I need the perfect playlist. 10 minutes later, he was still looking for music. The assignment hadn't moved at all. Pico laughed. I'll do literally anything except start. That's when he discovered another idea from psychology. The hardest part of almost every task isn't finishing it, it's starting it. Your brain doesn't know how long a task will actually take. It only guesses. And most of the time, it guesses wrong. It sees a large assignment and imagines hours of frustration. It sees a difficult conversation and imagines embarrassment. It sees exercise and imagines exhaustion. So before you've even begun, your brain quietly whispers, maybe later, not because it wants to ruin your life, because it's trying to protect you from discomfort. Thousands of years ago, avoiding unnecessary effort made sense. Energy was precious. If something looked expensive, your brain encouraged you to save your energy. That instinct helped humans survive. But today, opening a textbook doesn't actually require fighting a mammoth. Writing an email isn't life or death. Starting homework won't drain every ounce of energy you have. Yet your brain still reacts, as if every difficult task is a potential threat. Pico finally realized something strange. The assignment wasn't painful. Thinking about the assignment was painful. And those were two completely different things. The longer he waited, the bigger the assignment became inside his imagination. Every hour he delayed, his brain added another layer of stress. Eventually, the assignment felt impossible, even though nothing about the assignment had changed. Only Pico's thoughts had. Then he wondered if his brain could exaggerate how difficult a task would be. Could it also be wrong about how good it would feel after finally getting started? Pico couldn't stop thinking about that question. What if his brain was lying to him? The next morning, he tried something different. Instead of telling himself, I'm going to finish the entire assignment, he made a much smaller promise. I'm only going to work for 2 minutes. That sounded almost too easy. 2 minutes. Anyone could do that. So Pico sat down, opened his notebook, and started writing. The first sentence wasn't very good. Neither was the second. But something unexpected happened. When the timer rang, Pico looked at the clock and ignored it. He kept writing. 5 minutes became 10. 10 became 20. Without realizing it, he had already finished half the assignment. Pico was confused. Where did all that motivation come from? Then he realized it hadn't appeared first. It appeared after he started. Most people believe motivation creates action, but very often, action creates motivation. Think about riding a bicycle. The hardest moment is pushing the first pedal. Once the wheels begin turning, keeping them moving becomes much easier. Your brain works in a similar way. Starting feels difficult. Continuing feels easier. Stopping sometimes becomes the difficult part. Psychologists call this momentum. Once your brain invests attention into a task, it prefers to keep going, instead of starting all over again. That's why watching just one more episode often turns into 3. Scrolling for 1 minute becomes 30. The same brain that keeps you stuck on social media can also keep you focused on studying. The trick is getting past the first few minutes. Pico finally understood. He had spent years waiting to feel motivated, but motivation wasn't late. He was simply waiting for it in the wrong place. It wasn't waiting before the work. It was waiting inside the work. From that day forward, Pico stopped asking, do I feel like starting? Instead, he asked, can I do just 2 minutes? Most days, that tiny promise was enough to get everything moving. And once it started moving, his brain didn't want to stop. But there was still one final mystery. If starting was easier with tiny goals, why did his brain keep pulling him back toward his phone, even in the middle of working? That answer was hiding in one tiny red notification. Pico looked back at everything that had happened over the last few days. He always believed procrastination meant one thing, laziness. But the more he learned, the less that explanation made sense. Every time he procrastinated, there was always a reason. Sometimes the task looked too big. Sometimes the reward felt too far away. Sometimes he was afraid of doing a bad job. And sometimes his brain simply wanted something easier. None of those things meant he was lazy. They meant his brain was doing exactly what brains have done for thousands of years. Avoid discomfort. Save energy. Look for quick rewards. The problem wasn't his brain. The problem was the world around it. Never before in history had distractions been this easy to reach. A single tap could lead to hundreds of videos, thousands of posts, millions of new things to see. Our brains were designed to survive in forests, not in a world where endless entertainment fits inside your pocket. Pico finally stopped asking, "Why am I so lazy?" Instead, he started asking a better question. How can I make starting easier? That one question changed everything. He broke big tasks into tiny ones. He stopped waiting for motivation. He removed distractions before sitting down. And most importantly, he accepted that some days would still be difficult. Because building focus isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up again tomorrow. One small step, then another, then another. Weeks later, Pico noticed something surprising. He wasn't finishing work because he suddenly became more motivated. He was finishing work because starting no longer felt impossible. And that's the strange thing about procrastination. It usually disappears long before motivation arrives. So if you think you're lazy, maybe you're asking the wrong question. Maybe you're just using a brain that was built for a completely different world. And once you understand that, you can stop fighting your brain and start working with it instead. Because the goal isn't to become someone new. It's to make it easier for the best version of yourself to show up. If you enjoyed learning with Pico, subscribe and join him in the next episode, where he discovers why Pico overthinks everything.